Howdy folks, welcome to another episode of the Scannell Agenda. Today's date is July 20th, 2017. This is show number 70, entitled A Day on the Beach. So welcome here to Cape Cod, everyone who's down visiting. I was at the beach with my lovely wife, Pam, and the wind had been blowing a little bit, and I was noticing quite a few of the little eelgrass shoots, that is the rhizome and the roots with the little green bit of eelgrass. And I'd always thought that this would be a good idea if we collect these up and get them replanted. And then, mine. I have a lot of ideas on how to mine the eelgrass from thick areas and get it transplanted into areas that need it so that we can make money on these scallops here. See, the eelgrass is the vine and the scallop is the fruit of the vine. That's about as simple as it gets. If you're not going to have eelgrass, then you're not going to have scallops. Now you can interrupt the scallops whereby you got to get them back, but that's temporary, and we're in such a temporary condition now, and we have to get these scallops reintroduced and brought back, and that's not as simple as scattering scallop seed. There's a lot more to it than that. So at the beach, I really started thinking about, kids, and how the kids love to make money. And when I worked at the Nantucket Marine Laboratory, I had a few kids, specifically under my care, and we would be doing little things together. And I remember once me and this kid invented a filter. We named it after him because we called it the Clayton filter. This was on Nantucket many years ago. And I think work is a good program for a juvenile delinquent. Get a kid working. Kids love to work and make a little money. It gets them on the right track. So often I think kids aren't working and they don't know what to do with themselves and they don't really have a good anchor. Work is really one of the good anchors. Going to church, having a good family, having a good school. Of course, there are many good anchors, but little jobs for a kid, I think, are important. So I had this drawn up, the Sea Farm Capitula Kids. Now, a capitula is, I was going to say I don't have one, but I do. See, sometimes we grow these little, it's like a boat slipper shell. We glue them back on and then varnish them up. So these are the boat shells, and they're called capitula. That's the Latin name. You can also call them a slipper shell, boat shell. But there's a lot of them, and they're not very good on my tender feet. And those can be taken up, too, by the kids. These kids can go and load them in and get them weighed up and get paid for them. Because we really want, for our tourism here on the Cape, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, the whole area, what we really want is beautiful sand beaches. And what I see isn't perfect on the sand side of the beaches. And I like a beautiful, perfect beach that's really nice and sandy and it's got the eelgrass cleaned out. A lot of this stuff kids can do. So I've got ages 7 to 11. These are the learners and doers, L-A-D-S, or the lads. And then from 12 to 14, you've got the trainers. And these would be kids that can do babysitting and work with the learners and the doers. And then 15 to 17, I've got your explorers and rangers. This is all beach work type stuff that would be happening. We'd be paying kids to come down from Fitchburg and Worcester and Boston and maybe Rhode Island if we're working with Rhode Island. Get the kids on the beach here and there, And if the word goes out, it's because we've got a lot of eelgrass washed ashore, most likely. That we need to get this eelgrass up, and then the eelgrass gets taken up and replanted. It can either be put directly into the bed where it's going to grow, or it can be put into pots where you get containers of it growing. Now the shell stock that's collected for these capitula kids, these shells that are all over the beach, incidentally, these are not really local seashells. They're not indigenous to the area. But they make a good mulch around plants. They also might be somewhat good for many other things. But you collect them up and you pay the kids by the pound. Seaweed can also be collected, and this can be also collected by the pound. To my way of thinking, your shoreside pickup would be better than over the road, let's say down to the parking lot. So you'd have boats that would be popping in and out, mostly at high tide, to pick up and drop off things. Sand filters that kids can, rake up the beach and make it a little nicer. That's labor, that's child labor, but these kids might really love the money, and they give a kid a little job. Give a little kid a little job. I remember when I was a kid, that's what I kind of lived for, Kids need to work, and they need to do well in school, and they need to behave and be obedient, etc. There's a lot of list of things kids need to do. On the list is work and have a little money and have the pride of workmanship for whatever they're doing. They're no different than anybody else, and that would start at age 7 to me. Now, collect live eelgrass shoots on the beach. You mobilize the many, and you can bus kids and their parents and, chaperones. You can bus them in, and they can tent and camp, etc. We'll find some place to put them. But a day on the beach means a day on the beach for a kid that is not living on Cape Cod. And of course you're going to have the kids that are living on Cape Cod doing this work too. But mainly for the kids that are not living here, not lucky enough to live here. But especially for the kids that live here and don't live here, it's a job. That's a Sea Farm Capitula Kids. That's a market quota system idea in that we have a stock of shells, we have a stock of the eelgrass shoots, we have stock of the beautiful dried eelgrass for mulch, etc. There's a lot of value in some of the things you find on the beach. As well, if it came to it, if we had a real blow and we had bay scallops washed ashore, which will happen in the future, but right now we're not really concerned with that here on the Cape, but on Nantucket, very much so. You want to mobilize people to get the seed back where it's going to be safe and happy. So, day at the beach, what more can we say? So this is a fishery management program, this Scannell agenda. But it just so happens that kids' programs do fit in to fishery management. And if you start a kid working, let's say on a farm or in a garden, these kids are going to be better off in college. They're going to be better off in every way. They're just going to have a lot more pride in themselves. So it's very much a value product that we add to these kids. And we're paying them something. Yeah, we're paying them, but we're getting something too, but we're getting a lot more than just, let's say if they're out there collecting these slipper shells or boat shells or capitula. And we're, if they're collecting, the kids are just out there working on the beach, and that to me would be ideal. So I have a little project here called Value Price Market Quota System. This would be dedicated to Fred Jennings. He's a Harvard economist. On versus unregulated capitalism. So the VP was Fred's attachment to the market quota system, and I totally agreed with him. So the current permit ownership reflects unregulated, stupid capitalism. That's what I have here, and it really does reflect stupid capitalism. Now, whether the unregulated comes into mind on your end of it, you might think things are being regulated. I think it's being regulated in the stupidest way possible, simply because we're not concentrating on the habitat. And the value price market quota system would be a good way to describe a system that would put a value on the habitat and really make it stick, not just putting a value on the habitat, but really valuing the habitat, which we don't do. That's why we don't have codfish, and it's stupid that we don't have codfish on Cape Cod. This is a totally mismanaged outfit here, worldwide, for fisheries management, because we don't have these sensible systems in place. Aside from that, there's no justice in ruining the ocean for people that need the seafood resources and the jobs. There's just no justice for these people that it get mismanaged. Now, over here, I think I wrote something earlier on this topic. And that is, we have no cod. That seems to be the problem, let's just say, in fisheries management. Okay, we have a little problem. There's no codfish, or there's few. Or it always seems to be, oh, there is codfish. And then pretty soon, we've caught them all. And then we go back to, oh, there's no codfish. So I say we still have a situation of no codfish because we have a little blip and then we wipe them out. That's not having codfish. Now, when the fringes agree, the political fringes, left and right, we are in deep trouble. And in this case, many years ago, the fringes agreed, but for two different reasons, that we should have this archaic, feudal-style system of fishing permits for the very select few, which I've always been opposed to for decades. Okay, we have the left. Their reasoning may be that we have fishermen in a program, and anyone in a program to the left wing, to the extreme left wing, this is what makes them giddy. It's a program. They love government programs. Now, on the right wing, the reasoning over there is equally silly, and that is, oh, we're giving money to businessmen with free permits and free fishing value, you know, and we're able to dole out favors to businessmen. Okay, how silly is that? Then the businessmen go and proceed to wreck the habitat. And the people in the program, they go ahead and proceed to wreck the habitat. So with the value price market quota system, since there's such a value placed on the habitat, the wrecking of the habitat would have to be paid for. And I like to use the pick your own strawberries. If you had a sign at your pick your own strawberries farm that said, pick your own strawberries for free and wreck the strawberry plants while you're at it, no big deal, okay? I mean, that's just what you want to do, so, I mean, that's the left wing, okay, that's fine. You know, it's kind of silly. And then offering up, by the way, just as a little aside, marine protected areas, MPAs, that just doesn't cut it. The whole ocean needs to be under the umbrella of the market quota system. And that means internationally, federally, and locally. And we can eliminate the state because it's just a ribbon of control, as I mentioned on the other shows. Now, the state's role would be incredibly important, but it would be supportive to federal and then supportive to local. And then in that way, you'd get these local and federal systems dovetailing with the support of the states. and we'd start firing on 8 cylinders with some protection for the habitat. Someone asked me today, what about the menhaden? What are they doing? And I said, I don't really know for sure, but I'm sure they're fished out as usual. The herring, you know, river herring, same thing. There's a lot of things that are fished out, have been fished out for years and years and years. And I think we're being desensitized to the fact that everything's gone and fished out. And as I mentioned on a show, you know, I knew the guys that knew when the eelgrass was here. These were fishermen who fished, you know, 1930 and before and previous. They were actually fishermen. And one of my best friends came to the Cape at the age 15. At age 15, his first job was on a whaleboat. And that was in the year 1900. So he poured a lot of his wisdom into me, and I remember telling a story on the show earlier about I had the answer for everything. I was 14. This was my first job at the gas station in Howardsport. And I was telling this guy, Louis, that all you had to do was basically bring scallops in and they'd grow. And he said, no, you have to have eelgrass. And he explained all about the eelgrass. Well, most of it took, I think. But, you know, when you're that age, everything seems so simple to just do it. But he explained, and his face was red at this point. Anyway, we have problems, right? We've got no codfish. And if you think you can solve the problem by then looking over at the fishermen and say, you know, what do the fishermen want to do? Well, at this point in time, as I've said, you've got to say to yourself, you know, Cape Codders and people here in New England and Massachusetts, at some point you have to say to yourself, maybe that's the wrong approach. What do the fishermen want to do? It is the wrong approach. You need production people in charge, and that would be especially your floating marine laboratory people. That's FML, Floating Marine Lab. It's all about the blue economy, getting the kids work, picking up eelgrass shoots, kids make money. The eelgrass that's dried on the beach, you can gather some of that for the farms and gardens. But eelgrass cultivation is foundationally one of the most important things we can do. And kelp cultivation too, but that's a little bit offshore. Now kids are going to work the beach, a day on the beach. They're going to have a little day on the beach, 10 minutes, and they're going to earn their dinner. And they're not going to do it if there's no system that says, we have a cash flow, the cash flow is sensible. Now, with big time taxes on the landings that come in, if we do cultivate the eelgrass and make the eelgrass beds beautiful, we're going to have an eelgrass team to start out with, about 40 people, let's say. Just add 5 people at a time. Start with 5 until you get to 40, and then you reassess. The University of New Hampshire would be called in. And the kids pick up the eelgrass shoots and use the star punch on the eelgrass. You go into a thick bed of eelgrass and you go mine out some eelgrass. And you find yourself building up acreage in the eelgrass and then seeding it with some scallops, both wild from Nantucket and the vineyard, I assume, because it's the only place where we have any scallops, and then with hatchery stock of a broad nature. So we can get into things like robotics and divers, etc., and helpers and interns and inmates doing some of this work too. But we have to be able to justify the expenses of doing all these ideas. And the scallops that come in, let's say on Nantucket, they have a good industry out there, and on Martha's Vineyard, they bring in a lot of money for the islands out there. And we had this industry. We used to buy our scallops from Tom Jameson, and his son used to fish out of Chatham. And one of my first fishing trips was out with Mark Simonich. He took me scalloping, and I saved a couple scallops for the aquarium. I had a nice saltwater aquarium, and they lasted, I think, through July. And he was astounded by that. So we've got to dredge and engineer new beds. We've got to do it right. Do it once, do it right. And if we have a $25 million bay scallop or Cape scallop or Nantucket bay scallop, every area calls it a different thing. That's okay. But if we have a $25 million goal, and then we have $20 a pound is kind of the baseline, then what we can do is we can see the cash flow working. And if you can see the history and then see it working and see that these guys here on the Floating Marine Lab know what they're doing and are talking production rather than it's mine. This is mine, you know, mine. Where's that going to get you? You know, exclusive fishing rights. It's mine. Where's that gotten us? Since the mid-1970s. Of course people want exclusive fishing rights. Don't give it to them. Give them the good system. A good production system is what this country needs. It's what the world needs, and the world followed us down this stupid rat hole of stupid management that's non-asset-based management. It's social-based management. What can we do for the fishermen? It's so neurotic. It's so neurotic, it's really pathetic. And we've got to get out of this mess that we're in. It's a terrible mindset that I'm up against here, fighting this terrible mindset that people want to help the fishermen. Oh, it's just terrible. Here's a redesign for C Street Beach. It's kind of a stinky area to swim in. So I've got that all redesigned. And when we get all these scanned up, there's going to be a lot of ideas there that people can look at. And maybe, you know, that might be a seed of an idea. That C Street boat storage, rack storage, etc. Now there's a risk and reward ratio, risk to reward ratio that we need to really look at. So we bet the whole farm on giving fishermen everything, and we lost. And we got fisheries now that are still collapsed, and the worse collapsed than they were in 1975, when this whole ridiculous genre about giving the fishermen what they wanted, which is permits, exclusive permits to fish, tied to nothing, tied to maybe the fishermen will know what to do and make the ocean really productive. Well, that didn't work. I can tell you exactly why it didn't work, because cultivators are cultivators. I'm a cultivator, but I'm a fisherman too. You don't get a high ratio of cultivators. You get more of gold miners, if you know what I mean. I have that written up too. But pickers, you know, having to do with the gold rush, pickers at the vineyard, they're pickers, okay? The gold rush, bonanza, gold miners, foragers, permit holding stakeholders is what we have now. Hunters, you know, hunters of the rabbit, the duck, the deer, the scallop. Gatherers. Okay, this has nothing to do with cultivation. When you get into cultivation, you get into agribusiness, agriculture, mariculture, etc. And tied to all this stuff too, as you go into the deeper levels, is you get bankers and finance and accounting and legal and more regulations, which I think we need, not necessarily more, just sensible regulations for the environment. If we want the environment to be healthy, and if we want the environment to make us money, then we have to do what Mother Nature wants, and not what we want to, you know. It's crazy to just expect Mother Nature to keep producing. So gardeners, farmers, farm workers, expert migrant pickers, soil engineers, seed engineers, irrigation people, you know, farm tax people, equipment people, planters, harvesters. These are all kind of things that you think about on a farm, but you don't think about as fishing technologies. But they do have a relationship, excuse me, a relationship to the future of farming, which is the sea farm. Pam and I are moving to Harwich. We just found out for sure today we're moving down to South Harwich. And I want to propose in Harwich the first of its kind, market quota system-based sea farm, maybe starting at Bank Street Beach. Just a small effort, but it's the right effort. So that's one of the reasons to move to Harwich. Now the fishery, local, federal, international, is only fishing, you know, except with a little bit of enhancement. And so that's not production. Fishing is only fishing. We need a holistic balance. We need aquaculture, and we need public aquaculture mainly, but also private aquaculture. We need that too. Now with the public aquaculture, that's the massive hatcheries. Thank you, 2 minutes. Floating marine labs that will produce and manage. See, you need the right people managing. You need the right people keeping an eye on the eelgrass beds and the scallop beds and saying, okay, well, we're getting pretty close here, folks, so you better be thinking about hanging up your dredges on this bed or that bed, you know, and what bed we're going to fish first and second and third, etc. You want the best people involved there. So Rhode Island has quite a story. I remember years ago I spoke to the Rhode Island State Aquaculture Association. They have quite a story with running into problems with private aquaculture. So we need to know the histories. We need to know about salmon farm pollution and feed issues, you know, feeding these fish. And there's a lot to do with private aquaculture that isn't good. But I think there's very little to do with the public aquaculture, 1 minute, that isn't good. There's very little to do with the public aquaculture that isn't good if we somehow, and this is the point with anybody's problem or issue regarding the government, somehow it's got to be rigged that the producers get incentivized to produce and not just they're in the government, you know. All right, so there's a lot to talk about here. A day on the beach was wonderful here on Cape Cod. And let's parlay these little eelgrass shoots and put the kids to work. Well, thanks for watching the Scannell Agenda.